That think about it doesn't mean anything. That's not a specific objection. So you have to define what that is ahead of time.
All right, everybody, welcome to the How to Sell Insurance podcast. I'm Ryan Federico, joined as always by Ashton Delango, Lunday, and Grant Lieber. And we are starting our second part of the two-part series of overcoming common objections. We did the first part that was common phone objections. Now we're going to jump into common objections in the appointment when you're meeting with a client to sell them insurance. Some of you are doing one call closes, and so these two things run together. A lot of you are setting appointments and having separate appointment times from phone times, and so these would be separate. But first thing that we want to address is the best time to overcome objections is before they happen. And I know Grant's got some takes on this about being a master presenter and eliminating objections before they come up. And so, Grant, you had some thoughts on kind of how to prepare yourself to overcome objections before they even come up for you. So take it away with that, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might sound like a little bit of a cop-out to be like, how do you overcome objections? Don't let them come up. But the reality of it is like that's kind of actually how this is supposed to work. You know, the analogy that I really like to give is when you're meeting with a client, we don't meet with people in the home anymore. Most people do not. They're generally doing this virtually. But I like to think of it as if I was sitting across the table from them and they're pointing like a loaded gun at me. And every bullet in that gun is like a reason for them not to take action. And maybe a bullet is like, I just don't understand the value in the policy to begin with. Another bullet could be the price. It might be too expensive. Another bullet could be, I have a family member friend who's in insurance that I'd want to talk to. So like every one of those bullets in the gun, we're systematically removing with our presentation. So the reason that we say the way that we overcome objection is by becoming a master presenter is because if you do a proper presentation, every component of that is going to remove each one of those bullets in the gun. At the end, there's nothing left for them to shoot you with. So I just think that if you really can check all the boxes before you present options, you're going to find that almost never do you get those objections, or at least significantly decrease it, is what I would tell people, man.
For sure.
Yeah, and that's such a huge key. If you're setting everything up well in the beginning, there won't be a lot at the end that you run into. A lot of those objections that people run into are because there's a lot of steps that were skipped or missed in the beginning. So if you hit those things well, you go through the why are we looking for this? All right, what don't we have? What do we have? All right, so even if those things are in place, not in place, what's going to happen then? What's life going to look like? All right, so why are we looking for this? How is this going to be different? How is this going to solve that problem? If you walk through all those things, when you get to that end, you don't have a lot of any of those things because they already thought about it because you just went through it for 15 minutes with them and you walk through it with them.
Yeah.
They already feel confident. They already trust you. They're willing to give you all of the additional information, the address, the social, the banking, all those things. So, hey, if you set that up right, at the end, you don't have to worry.
Yeah, totally. I think there's also what I call boomerangs, or what I've heard of called boomerangs, I should say. So like in that process of setting up the appointment, setting up the ground for the appointment to happen, doing what Ashton just said, one of the questions that I like to ask is, how long have you been thinking about doing something like this? And that's a boomerang question, because then you throw the boomerang at the beginning of the appointment, and when you get to the end of the appointment, they're like, we want to think about it. You catch that boomerang and go, you said you've been thinking about this for 6 months already. How much longer do you need to think about it, right? So you said you've been thinking about this for 5 years, or your wife says you've been thinking about this for 3 years. It's like, how long are we going to think about this before we get something done? And you can kind of overcome those objections because you asked early on, how long have you been thinking about doing something like this? And so I think overcoming these objections before they happen is incredible. I love especially avoiding the think about it by addressing the think about it before you give them prices, right? So we know that we're going to get these common objections and we're going to help you with some ways to overcome those. But I think this is the second point, is like, how do you react to objections? Are you expecting to get objections? Are you preparing yourself for, I know for sure I'm going to get objections? Or are you just like kind of hoping that you don't get objections and you don't have to overcome them? And then when you get an objection, it throws you off your game. So I would like give you best piece of advice that I ever got was like, plan to get every objection in every appointment. So then if you don't, you're happily surprised that you didn't get that one objection that you were planning on getting, right? But plan for them to be a one-legger. Plan for them to tell you no. Plan for them to tell you that it's too expensive. Plan for them to tell you that they can get coverage through work for cheaper. Plan for them to tell you that they need to talk with their financial advisor about it. If you plan for all these things and you have your responses pre-programmed, you're going to be better prepared if it happens, and you're going to feel a lot better if it doesn't happen. And so just know that you're going to get objections. So when I get the think about it, I love covering the think about it before I present pricing, because then I can just say like, look, I've heard people tell me they need to think about it or sleep on it or pray about it. And I know that just means it probably doesn't fit in your budget. I think we've established here that you need some insurance coverage. So will you just be honest with me and tell me that this doesn't fit in your budget rather than tell me that you need to think about it or pray on it, whatnot? I'll go ahead and find you some coverage tonight that does fit in your budget, and we'll make sure that we get your family protected. Can we agree on that before I show you these options? And it takes the think about it away. So they're not going to tell you, yes, I agree to that. And then you show them prices and 2 minutes later, they're like, well, we're going to mull these over. They already agreed to not do it. Right. So when we come to these most common objections, guys, like think about it, what we do with a one-legger, or it's too expensive. Let's start off with the think about it, because that seems to be the most common when we run into people needing to think about it. So I guess we can just sort of go around the circle here. Grant, when you're running into somebody telling you they need to think about it, what is it that you're doing to kind of overcome that objection most often?
Yeah. So I think the first thing you have to realize is that think about it doesn't mean anything. That's not a specific objection. So you have to define what that is ahead of time. You mentioned a couple of really effective tools, if you want to go back to that analogy of taking those bullets out of the gun, ahead of time by being a master presenter. The elements that I think need to be in place is, you mentioned, talking about like, hey, if it's a price issue, just let me know. So one thing that I'd like to ask, if somebody says to me, all right, thanks for giving us that info, we're going to go ahead and take a couple days and think about this. So first of all, as the agent, you need to realize there's always two sales going on. There's us trying to sell them on this product and to take action today, and to take action today with us in particular. And then there's them trying to sell us that either they can't afford it, or that maybe they don't need it, or maybe this is not the right time to take action. You have to understand that when you get that, I want to think about it, you think about this and you go, okay, well, this is an $85 a month policy that I'm showing them. They could go to Costco later this afternoon and spend $300 or $400 or $500 without blinking an eye, but they have to think about making an $85 a month commitment that's going to protect their family and keep a roof over their head if something were to happen. Those things don't compute. So clearly we haven't built the value around this plan, and we haven't made it really make sense for them in their budget. So that's just something kind of a prepare the mind, going into this. So when I hear that I want to think about it, I either have to go into I did my presentation correctly, and because I did my presentation correctly, I've now earned the right to be very straightforward and honest with them. And what that might mean is like, okay, so totally can understand that you want to think about this. I know it's a financial decision you guys want to make. That being said, 20 minutes ago, you had just told me that if you don't come home tomorrow, your wife, after 2 or 3 months of burning through the savings, is now not in a position to stay in this home. And you told me that she's going to have to move. She's going to have to do this. The kids are going to get displaced. All these kinds of bad things are going to happen. So with that in mind, that you had shared that with me earlier, what is it that you really need to think about? So just asking them to define it, but you have to earn the right to ask them to define it by having gone through a thorough presentation ahead of time. So that would be my advice on that front.
You're reminding them why they want this, and that basically indicates that you've also uncovered why they want this, right? And so, yeah, you got to uncover what the actual reason is that's going to push them forward before you can get upset that they're telling you they need to think about it. If you're just coming in and going like, hey, nice to meet you, it's $27 a month, they're going to be like, okay, cool, I'll get back to you, because there's no reason for them to buy this. And Ashton, I know you have an NEPQ more response to think about it. I want to share one thing before we go into the NEPQ, because I love the Ashton's response to this. I've heard it several times. One of the things that I like to do when I get the think about it or whatever, I think that consumers today are expecting to hear common sales responses because they've been in enough sales interactions with like old, outdated sales systems that they've heard well, what is it that you need to think about? Is it the price, or is it the company, or are you uncomfortable with me? Or they've heard all that BS before. And their mind is primed to go like, I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to hear this, and then I'm going to overcome it like this, right? And they're prepared to counter your objection, counter your rebuttal, I should say. Yeah, counter your rebuttal. But if we stop them in their tracks and kind of make them think for a minute and ask them a question that they're not expecting, a lot of times we'll get the real answer. So if we want to define what's actually stopping them from moving forward, a lot of times I'm going to ask them, if they're like, hey, we need to think about it, we need to mull it over, instead of me saying like, oh, well, what do you need to think about? I'll go, that's totally fine. On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being you're never going to do this and 10 being you're for sure going to do this, where are you? And if I get anything below a 7, like, so number one, they're not expecting to hear this question. And like, if I get anything below a 7, I know that I haven't built enough value. If I get like 8, 9, 10, somewhere in there, I just go, well, what's missing to get you to a 10? And since they weren't expecting to hear that question, they are kind of off guard. And so a lot of times they'll tell you exactly what it is that's missing. Well, I don't know if we can do the $233 a month. I got to check my bank account. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, what if we dropped it down right now? We just applied you for 100,000. We set your billing date out for 30 days, or whatever. And we just got you approved. And then, between now and 30 days, if you get approved, you can just tell me if you want to stay at 133 or if you want to go up to 233. And now I can negotiate, because I have the real objection of why they want to think about it is that they don't know if that payment's going to work and they need to check their bank account, right? But I found that out because I was like, on a scale from 1 to 10, where are you? And they were like 8. I was like, okay, what's missing to get you to a 10? And now the real objection comes out and I can handle it and negotiate. But
so, sorry to take this off course, but you said something that really had reminded me of another thing really along those lines that I've had success with is, when you say you want to think about it, is this something that you need to think about for a day, a week, a month, a year? And I like asking that question because if they're telling me, oh, this is like more of a, sleep on it tomorrow morning, get back to you kind of deal. Now, if they say something like, oh, it's a day or two kind of thing, or hey, let's follow back up on Friday, or whatever the case may be, like that's a situation where then I can kind of go for that. Okay, well, listen, at this point, we're just trying to get you approved. We can schedule a future draft date. That's very effective in that sense. If they are saying something like, I don't know, maybe it's a later this year thing, or maybe it's in a couple months from now, that's how just kind of like how you asked 1 to 10, where are you at with this? That you haven't built the value and they're not seeing a sense of urgency.
For sure. And just to be clear, that means that I messed up, right? That's not their fault. Like, I didn't build enough value in this policy, and I didn't build enough urgency in their situation. I didn't ask enough questions to get them foaming at the mouth to buy insurance. And that's my fault. I have the capability of doing that. That's not their fault. But that comes back to the NEPQ kind of response. Ashton, what do you think, man?
Yeah. And I mean, there's a few, important principles to really premise anytime we're really getting these objections, especially, toward the end here. It's not that, buyers are liars, and it's just awkward to tell people the real objection sometimes. It's usually not that we're, trying to lie. It's just you don't want to create a conflict. So that means, it really kind of comes down to a few things in order to help people feel comfortable to speak freely without the conflict, which is, recognizing that when it comes to insurance, almost every objection is going to be about money. and that they want to shop around and get quotes from others for, a couple different reasons. Either, hey, after the conversation, they don't trust you, or they just expected that it was going to be a little bit less than what you said, or maybe a lot of bit less. And so what that means for us is we don't have to get really, really good at handling 50 million different objections, which is great. We just got to get really good at driving all the objections, that we get down that same path, because it's going to be typically about, one of those two things. Either they think it's going to be cheaper somewhere else, or they, simply just don't trust us, but it's something to do with money typically. So if we walk through and diffuse, acknowledge, clarify, and, paraphrase to drive towards money, test, and isolate, we're typically going to be able to solve that problem. In the way that I do it, very simply. Or I'll let you go ahead, Aaron.
No, man, I love that. And I think that response is a very, I guess it's in line with what we talked about earlier, where it's like preparing yourself that's going to happen. It's like knowing, okay, if I get this, it's usually because of this or this. It's like what we talked about on the phones. If somebody tells me they're not interested on the phones, it's usually because either they already got it taken care of, or they got some prices and it was too expensive. Like 99% of the time, I know it's one of those two things, right? So if I'm getting this objection in the appointment, I usually know it's mainly because of money, right? Or it's a hesitancy to make a decision, or something like that, but it's probably 99% about money, and I need to just negotiate the money. It's knowing in the trenches that response. So when you're getting it though, and let's say that you don't address it early on, you don't overcome the objection before it happens, you give somebody pricing, whatever, and then they come out with like, okay, cool, well, we're going to review these, or we're going to shop around, or we'll get back to you on Thursday or something. What's typically the response that you're giving them, Ashton, from your standpoint? And I know it doesn't happen a lot because you have to like mess up the first half, the appointment in order. But if you do, what happens?
Yeah. So that, think about it where we're getting it kind of in the closing, the way that I'm going to walk through it. Like I said, that first part, we have to diffuse and clarify. Whether they say, hey, let me think about it. Look this over, or whatever the case is, send me stuff, let me think about it, whether they say a time frame or not. The first thing I'm going to do is diffuse it. Yeah, hey, that's not a problem. Just to see if there's something that I could help with. Can I ask what is it specifically that you're wanting to think about? Or if they said talk to the spouse, what is it specifically you're wanting to talk over with your spouse about? Diffuse and clarify. Diffusing, that's not a problem. Clarifying, what is it exactly we're thinking about? Then I'm going to kind of paraphrase back what they said. If it's to think about it, I see that the policy makes sense. You want to move forward. You just want to double check the bank account and kind of make sure everything is going to fit every month. Is that right? Fit every month. Yeah, absolutely. Or, the spouse. I see that the policy makes sense. You want to move forward. You just want to double check with your spouse, double check with your wife, your husband, and make sure you're on the same page in everything. Yeah. All right. Then I'm going to isolate and test. So now I've diffused it. I've clarified it. I've paraphrased it back to them. Now I'm going to isolate the problem, and I'm going to put it to the test here. So if you go check and, everything looks good, would you want to go ahead then? All right. So if you go check the bank account and the finances the way you want it to be, like, would you go ahead then, or the spouse? So if you talk with them and, they're on the same page, would you want to go ahead then? Yes. All right, great. So now I'm going to kind of start moving through, kind of tell them what most people do to help get us in that direction. I got it. Yeah, we see this all the time. Yeah, I completely understand. We don't want you sleeping on the couch tonight. Can I share kind of what most of our clients do in this situation? And then I move forward. Insurance is a lot different, than buying a car. It's not something you're locked in as soon as you drive off the lot. The insurance, the first step is, to get you qualified. You you couldn't, pay for it today if you wanted to. We got to go through. We got to go get through that qualification period. And so that's that period where I'm helping ease that process. And what most people do in your situation is they want to make sure they can get qualified. Then if we need to change the coverage afterwards, because we always can, we have 30 days to make any changes we need to. You want to think about it, get more, get less, or, whatever it may be, and, without having to re-go through all that paperwork.
Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses in your response too, which is huge. Is like what most people do. Can I share with you what most of our clients do in your shoes, or something like that? I love that permission base. And there's a new objection that you addressed that I think we want to talk about, which is if you, number one, it's a one-leg appointment. What happens if you start off an appointment and the other decision maker isn't there, husband or wife or spouse or, whatever? And then what happens if you decide to run that appointment and you get to the end and that there's going to be a huge potential for an objection of like, I need to talk with my spouse. Ashton just gave you his. I have some thoughts on it, but I know, Grant, you have a great way when you first start the appointment to kind of identify if I'm dealing with a one-legger or not. How do you handle it?
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to note, like, different producers, different agents have different styles that they feel more comfortable with. For example, we were talking about this. Ashton is actually okay meeting with someone without their spouse. That's what we call a one-legger, where the husband without the wife or vice versa, or basically if there's two decision makers, one of them isn't there, that's a one-legger. And so, Ashton feels comfortable actually just kind of going through and running that appointment and, being able to overcome that. If there is an objection that even comes from it, he's confident in that. I, on the other hand, actually prefer to set the table, making sure that both decision makers are there to really cut that down. Yeah. And so what I do, so for me, predominantly, I'm doing phone appointments, meaning that I'm not seeing them face to face. I'm not walking into their house like and said, hey, where's Sarah at? That'd be pretty easy. Oh, she's in the other room. Let me grab her, But when we're on the phone, we can't see that. And so what I like to do so if I was calling a client and, I say, hey, it's Grant. I was reaching out to you about our appointment this afternoon about the mortgage protection, about the life insurance, still a good time to chat. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. And then, was Sarah there with you? And they'll usually be like, oh yeah. And now when they say, oh yeah, they're there, what they generally mean is they're in the house or they're in the yard, but they're present in the general vicinity, but they're not on this phone call. And so what I like to do is I go, oh, hey, Sarah, how are you? And then they're like, oh, that means he actually wants them to be in this conversation. And then they're like, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, let me grab her. So that's my little just trick over the phone. Same thing with Zoom, just to be able to get them on the phone there.
So huge, man. And like, I think that this is probably a topic for a whole nother podcast, just about interacting with both decision-making parties and how powerful it can be. A lot of times we tend to skew towards like the most dominant personality. And that dynamic has been happening in their relationship probably the entire time, where you have one person who's like dominant and one person who is quiet, or whatever. And if you start involving the person who's quiet, like the dominant person knows that they're a dominant person and that they typically drown out the quiet person. It's probably come up in their marriage before. And so like, if you start going like, well, Sarah, what do you think about that? Do you have any other opinions? Like the dominant person kind of shuts up and then whatever Sarah says goes typically. So it's like, it's really the dynamic of doing that is powerful. I think that, the point that I would make, and then the one objection, way to overcome the objection is when I start off an appointment and it is a one-legger. So what happens? I go, hey, is Sarah there? And Bill goes, no, she's not here. I need to decide, am I just going to reschedule this appointment or am I going to run it? Ashton's like, I'm going to run it, no problem. For me, I don't have a problem running it as long as I set up, again, overcoming objections before they happen. If I set up the expectation that they're going to be able to make a decision without that person. And so I do it in a somewhat bold and inflammatory way. And so if you don't have this type of personality, please don't attempt this, at home without adult supervision. But I will say something, male or female, doesn't matter. If I have the wife, if I have the husband, whatever, if, it's a co-gendered spouse, whatever. But if I have somebody that's like, they don't need to be here, my initial question is like, oh, got it. Do you have permission to make a decision without that person? It's always like, they gave you permission to make decisions about this without them? It's asking in a very like an insulting way. If I have a husband, I'm like, so your wife gave you permission to make a decision on this without her? Really? Like it's like a very cutting to the core, almost like emasculating question. And for women, it's like, especially in the culture, you know, and sort of the climate today, you ask a woman, your husband gave you permission to make a decision like this without him, especially if you're a guy and you're asking that question. It's just like, I don't need my husband to make decisions. Like, what do you mean he gave me permission? I don't need permission. Like, it's kind of insulting a little bit. And this is like, well, I didn't mean to be insulting. I just wanted to make sure that like you have permission to do this. It's another boomerang. So at the end, when they're like, I'm going to talk to my husband about it, it's like, well, hold on a minute. You told me that you didn't need that person's permission to do this. You know, like what happened to that?
In fact, they might even prove to you how they don't need the permission
100%.
by being, by being the one that might actually be like, all right, let's do this.
I
let's
can
go.
do this on my own. Yeah, 100%.
This one, yeah.
But I want to make sure that we're on the same page. That like, I'm going to get to the end of this appointment, and you're not going to tell me that you need to, you need to talk to your husband about this. You need to talk to your wife about this, whatever. If I get to that point, right, and I have this happen, and we all, I think, have this happen where it's like, oh, all right, I need to talk to my wife about it. I need to talk to my husband about it, whatever. They're not there. It's a risk that I run. I think they're expecting us to say something like, let's get them on the phone, or could you call them now? Or, like, what do you think that they would say? Or I'm sure that you guys have already talked about this. You wouldn't be on a meeting with us if you hadn't talked about this already, or whatever. And they expect the typical sales response. What I typically say is, what if she says no? That's my typical go-to. Like, oh, so what if you talk to her and she says no? Or what if you talk to him and he says no? What then? And they're typically going to give you one of two responses. It's either like, well, she's not going to say no. And then I can deal with that from there and be like, okay, well, she's not going to say no. Why don't we just apply you for this? And while you guys are discussing it, we'll see if you get approved. If he's like, well, if she says no, I guess we're not going to get the coverage. Now I can really guide down to, well, what do you think she'd say no to? The price, blah, 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 blah. Well, what if we did this? And now I can negotiate. What if we just applied you for $100,000 instead of $200,000, and we see if you get approved? We set your billing date out into the future, and we go ahead and start this process. And now I can leverage it. But I just love that. What if she says no? Question. Anyway, one of the things, the last point to cover is what happens if they don't want to give you their personal information. Right. I don't want to give you my Social Security. I don't want to give you my banking info. How do you overcome that? So Ashton, let's start with you on that one, man.
Yeah. So, I'm going to take in my opinion, again, a very similar approach. Again, I'm going to diffuse that in the beginning. I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you. If they go, oh, I'm not giving you my social, typically, actually, I really get this on the banking. For some reason, people are like, yeah, I'll give you my social. I can go get a new one. Yeah, they'll give you the social, but then they're like, well, I don't want to give all my bank information now. What? Well, either way, I didn't mean to offend you, and give them time to respond. And typically they're going to go, oh yeah, you didn't offend me. I just don't want to give that out. Okay, now just so you're aware, this is for the insurance company's records. Once I type it in, typically blacks out, X's out. Nobody's going to see it except for them. They just want to make sure, you are who you say you are. And then they want to make sure it's easy when you do pass for the beneficiary to actually file everything and get the money. And, every company will require it. What's your social? And then if they still don't give it to you, they do it again. Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. It's a crazy world nowadays. So is this one, is this more one of those things where it's like, I'm not 100% sure I want it yet? Like I need to think about it and be 100% before I give that out? Or Is it more like I'm 100% sure, but I'm not giving that to anyone? And again, like, I'm going to isolate and test. Like, where are we at here? Is this just like, it doesn't matter if I called you, I'm the president of the United States, I'm on FaceTime with you, I'm on Zoom with you, like I'm sitting at your kitchen table, like you're still not giving it out to me? You know who I am and you trust me? Like, hey, I'm whoever you like the most in your life. Like you're just not giving it out? Or is the real objection, I don't know if I actually want to do this. Like, I need to think about it. I don't like the price. And that's where on the social I go. And I can kind of keep walking through that.
Yeah, they're not sold yet. Basically, they haven't bought mentally yet enough to give you their payment information. I think that would be my point. And Grant, I'll kind of let you end us off on this one. But like, if they're not giving you their social, if they're not giving you their banking information, they're not sold. We didn't build enough value early on in the appointment. They haven't said out loud enough why they want this or how much they want this, right? We didn't ask good enough questions, and they're typically not sold. Because here's the reality. Every single one of those people, especially if you're working in the mortgage protection market like we are, every single one of those people, when they bought their house, right, they called DirecTV or Cox Cable or AT&T or whoever their TV provider was, and they gave somebody in a Bangladesh call center their social security, their bank account info, no problem, just right over the phone, because they trusted AT&T and they wanted to buy cable. Right? Or they trusted Verizon and they wanted to buy internet. They had no problem giving them their social, giving them their bank account, credit card info, whatever. And so it's just that you haven't built enough trust with them, or they don't want the product enough yet. That's the issue with getting their information. When it's a social security number, I'm normally just like, well, hey, if you die, do you want your beneficiary to be able to get the money? And they go, yeah. Okay, so I'd say beneficiary. I have their name by then. So if you die, like, do you want Sarah to be able to get this money? Yes. It's like, okay, well, the way that she's going to do that is by giving them the social. And so they can associate the amount of money with the social with your death certificate and all those things. So if we don't have your social on this, she's never going to get this money. So, what's your social so that she can get this money when you die? And I remind them about their beneficiary essentially. And a lot of times they'll give up their social that way. If it's a banking issue, a lot of times it's like, well, I don't give my bank account info to anybody. And it's like, well, I know that's exactly why the insurance company wants it, because if you give your credit card info out a lot, your credit card can change expiration dates. There can be fraud or whatnot. And then your insurance lapses and you don't have coverage, and you get in a car accident and you don't have coverage. With bank accounts, they rarely change. That's why insurance companies use this, because it's the most important thing. So that's why they use your bank account, checking account, or routing number. So what bank do you bank with? And a lot of times they'll give me the info. So last thoughts on this, Grant, and then we'll close this thing down.
Okay, so I think that the first thing I would say is about your posture. And as my college professor would say, he'd go ding, ding, ding whenever he was about to say something where it's like, hey, write this down because it is going to be on an exam. If somebody gives you an objection, and this really is for any objection, rookie agents get really flustered. Oh, well, the reason that you need to give me your social is because we want to make sure that if you die, they're going to pay you. And don't you want your family to get paid? So the important thing is that you need to act as if you've heard it before. Act as if it's, whenever I get an objection, I kind of treat it like they're kind of crazy to even give me an objection. Like, what do you mean? Like, what I'm thinking is like, what do you mean you don't want to give me your social? Like, that's how this works. So when I'm in the presentation, or when I'm at the application, I was always taught, and shout out to my really good buddy and mentor, Carl Miller, I was taught about the rule of three. And the rule of three means that if you get somebody to give you 3 pieces of information, they're generally going to give you 10 or 15 or 20 more pieces of information, or they'll answer that many more additional questions. So when I get into an application, my first question is not what's your social. My first thing is I want to verify what I already have. So, hey, Ashton, what I have for you, email is this, phone number is this, of course. And I know we had talked about, you said your age. What was your date of birth? So what's the date of birth? Okay, what's your home address? And, Arizona, is that the state you were born in as well? No, Florida. Okay, gotcha. Perfect. And then social. So it's part of like I'm reading it off. It's not a big deal. And so I make it very like straightforward as it's just part of the process. Now, if somebody said to me, why would I give that to you, or why did I need that? What I say is I go, so there's a couple things. So first of all, it's just for general identity purposes. Want to make sure that we're verifying you're the right person. So if anything should happen, want to make sure that we get your beneficiaries paid. But secondly, whenever the insurance companies are underwriting this policy, the reason that a nurse isn't going to come out and have to take blood and urine and do an EKG and do that all kind of paramed exam is because they use your social to actually check your prescription and health database to determine if you're eligible for this policy. So with that in mind, what was that social? So you just kind of, Yep. So I explain it, right? We kind of deflect, and then, we go through that process. And then when it comes to the banking information, it really falls in that same category. So hey, listen, the way this policy works is, we're going to put in this application here, that $85 a month in the event you are approved would get drafted. And then in subsequent months, what day of the month would you prefer? 15th. Okay, awesome. And then who did you bank with? What's the routing number? What's the account number there? Now, when you showed them an option, when you showed them that it's going to cost them $112 a month, they understand that they then need to pay. If you go to a cashier and they say, okay, that'll be $19.95, they're not going to be like, oh, well, what do you mean you need $19.95? Like, they just pay it. So it's the same thing here. You presented an option, they picked the option, you're at the end of the application. So it's just a natural thing that you get that information. So if they don't want to give bank information, what I just let them know is I go, hey, the reason behind that is the insurance companies want to know that if they're going to be serious about taking the time to underwrite your coverage, to look at your medical background, to understand if you qualify, they want to know that you would be serious about wanting to take this policy and get yourself covered. The other element to that is that whenever we do submit a completed application, that means that you're what's called conditionally approved. That means if you passed away tonight, tomorrow, the next day, God forbid, your family's still gonna get paid, assuming this policy is ultimately approved, because we submitted a completed application that had the ability for them to draft that first premium.
Yeah, I love that. By submitting this application, they're on the hook for $100,000 if you walk out the door tomorrow and get hit by a car. Even if you haven't been approved yet, if you do get approved, they have to pay that $100K backdated to when you signed this. So that's why they want to make sure if they're going to be on the hook for $100,000 that they at least have a payment account to withdraw the premium out of. So what's that bank account again? And just jump back into it. So great mic drop moments. That's our overcoming common appointment objections part 2. And we'll be back to you with more fresh content. As always, like and subscribe to the channel. Click the little bell so that you know whenever we release new stuff. We got a bunch of episodes coming, a bunch of great content, and we will see y'all later. Peace, everybody.